Good morning, everybody. My name is Katrina, and I am the events coordinator for the Toadstool Bookshops in Keene, Peterborough, and Nashua, New Hampshire. We are thrilled to welcome all of you today to the book release for local artist Kim Cunningham and her book Block Paper Chisels. The book is available at all three Toadstools and is available online at toadbooks.com. So we encourage you, if you enjoy what you see today, please come down to the bookstore, check it out, support a local writer, a local artist, and support a local bookshop. I'm going to turn it over to Kim and Sarah from Meddaugh Publishing.
Thank you, Katrina, and thanks to the Toadstool for hosting this event. I'm really, really thrilled to share this new book with all of you, and I'm so happy to see so many friends here too. First of all, I really, really want to acknowledge Sarah Bowen and Henry James from Bowen Publishing, who really put their hearts into this project. And also, I want to thank Beth Cromas and Cy Montgomery for giving me such great blurbs for the back cover, and has made this a really beautiful back cover. So I'm going to talk a bit about the book, and while I do, Sarah is going to share some images with you. Then we have a 17-minute video to show you of me in my studio in Hancock making a block print from start to finish. And as we're showing that, please think of any questions that you'd like to ask and send them in to us. And also at any time you can call any of the Toadstool Bookshops and ask to order a book or books, and I would be happy to personalize them for you and leave them at the Toadstool. So some background information. Starting in 2016, I've done 3 calendars with Bowen. This was the first one, the Monadnock calendar, with all these different images from all these towns circling around Monadnock. And we had a great time putting these calendars together, and we had a good response. So the book has really grown out of those calendars, and we started with the 36 images from the calendars and then built on the images from there. I made some new block prints. I reprinted some old blocks, and I even included some prints that I did in college. And I also wrote some haiku to go with the Monadnock series and the Wild Things series. Then I added some background information about why I like to do block prints and why I gravitate towards nature as a subject matter. I really wanted this book to be somewhat educational, showing the process, and I have to say that the writing was the most challenging part, to, be informative but not long-winded. So without further ado, let's look into the book here. I'm going to start reading a little bit from the Monadnock series. And here is the opening spread from that. I'm reading an excerpt from my journal. I was reading an article in Smithsonian Magazine about Edo period Japanese art. They mentioned Hokusai's 36 views of Mount Fuji, and I dug out my copy of the book. As I was looking at it, an idea gelled. I've thought for some time that I'd like to do a series on Monadnock. I'm feeling that it would be neat to do 12 months of Monadnock, a print maybe in 2 colors for each month. One good print a month for a year, that would be wonderful. Also, I'd love to do a haiku to go with each. What really strikes me about Hokusai is the fabulous perspectives he uses. Fuji often tiny with all sorts of fascinating things and activity in the foreground. I'd like to do that with Monadnock. Next year will be our 20th year in the Monadnock region and the last year of the millennium. I'd like to commemorate it somehow. This project took me much longer than the year I had anticipated. Working from actual locations was good discipline for someone who usually works more from her imagination. Searching for interesting views of the mountain happily led me to explore many places I'd never seen. And now Sarah's going to show a spread.
Maybe. There we go. Can you see it?
So this is at the beginning of this section, and we're not going to, go into this whole thing, but it's just really to show everyone the process of doing these prints. And here's January.
Okay, there we go.
January. This is right near our house, a very beloved view. We can move on to February.
Yep.
And as you can see, I actually did these haiku in calligraphy. I studied calligraphy in college, and it's something that I really love to do. So let me just read this one to you. Silky swish of skis, shadows draped like scarves on snow, such tranquility. Okay, we can move on to March. So as you can see, I was trying to do pictures just of nature, some with people or animals in them, and some with, buildings. And this was in Troy, New Hampshire, just as the ice was going out. And I actually put a kayak in this water here and did some sketching and did some photographs as I was bobbing around in this cold water. And here's the haiku. Unlocking season, when the first raindrops dance on the last tired snow. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section.
Okay, hang on. Escape. Going to owls.
All right, so let me just quickly read a tiny bit here. For a printmaker, there is something compelling in the simple, iconic shape of an owl's large, rounded head and huge eyes. An owl can be easily abstracted, yet its feathers provide a wonderful opportunity to explore complex patterns. Some of my owl prints are realistic, celebrating a few of the 11 species of owls found in New Hampshire, while others are flights of fancy. So this spread here is quite interesting. As you can see on the right-hand side, I have got the prints on paper, and I inked up this block with 2 different colorways and printed it on this piece of paper. And then on the left-hand side, I've used the same block, and I've actually been able to print it into clay. For many years, I did ceramics at the former Sharon Art Center, and I discovered that I could roll out a slab of clay and get a fabulous print with my block prints. And I even have taken some of them and made them more three-dimensional, made vases out of them and things like that. So these blocks are incredibly versatile. So let's move on to the next image.
Okay, hang on. That one?
Yes. This is another rather unusual way of printing. These are both collages, which is something I very much enjoy doing. And the one on the left of the baby barred owls is fairly traditional. I used handmade papers and also papers that I printed on, and did a lot of slicing and dicing and glued this image together. And then the one on the right, I actually was able to print onto birch bark. I glued a lot of pieces of birch bark onto a substrate, and then had one chance to get a good print on this birch bark, which was really challenging, and managed to do it. And then I did some collaging over that of the little leaves that I cut out of birch bark. So I really have a great time experimenting with all these different techniques. And okay, now we're going to move on to the next section.
Okay, hang on. We're off to wild things, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let me just read you a bit from the introduction here. The idea for the Wild Things series came to me when I saw a deer foraging for apples in an overgrown orchard just down the road from our house. His antlers merged so perfectly with the apple tree that he seemed to be wearing it. The visual possibilities of this image delighted me, and I started to think about other animals transforming into their landscapes. I realized that the shape of a beaver mimics a lodge, a turtle's a lily pad, a chickadee's a pine cone, and so on. I decided to imagine an animal for each month of the New England year. So here we have December, the bears, and as you can see, I just let my love for pattern completely rip, and I made decorative borders for the haiku out of parts of the print. And I also hand lettered titles for each of these. So here's our bear haiku. Bears big as boulders under comforters of snow, snooze through the winter. Okay, let's move on to the next. The owl. Full moon, owl in flight, wings stroking the winter night, silent shifting shape. And we can do one more, the bobcat. Dappled bobcat threads through snowy birches, leaving a stitchwork of tracks. So these actually were printed in black and white, and then I colored them in with watercolor. So that's another technique that I like to do. Okay, and the next section is trees. So all of these images in the tree section are new. They haven't been in the calendars at all. And some of them are quite realistic and others are very abstract. And let me just share with you my little intro to this. Trees have been central to my life and art since my earliest days. As a child, I was an arboreal creature, climbing trees, swinging from trees, and camping out in the deluxe treehouse that my dad and I built in the backyard. Now that I'm older and more terrestrial, nothing is finer than walking under the trees, feeling their energy connect earth and sky. I love sketching them or carving intricate blocks, losing myself in the dance of branches. New Hampshire is over 80% wooded, so inspiration is never far away. Gracing a town, punctuating a field, or filling a forest, trees are a life-giving and life-affirming presence. So here we have a very abstract collage of birch trees. I printed my bark patterns on a lot of different decorative papers and then just cut them up into all kinds of little strips and glued them down. And the panel on the right-hand side is a sort of subtle list of all the different birch trees that grow in New Hampshire. So we can move on to the next one.
hang on. Ah,
Giving you a little preview here.
for,
There's Peterborough.
wait, I went too far. Hang on, to go backwards. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just a tantalizing glimpse of some of the other spreads. So here's a little panel of the seasons, and I had such a good time taking this one block of the trees and printing it in a lot of different ways. So starting in the upper left is the winter print, and I printed this on gray paper, and first I printed the block in white ink, and then I slightly offset it and printed it in black ink. Then the one below it is the spring one, and I actually took watercolor and colored the paper, and then I did a rainbow roll of ink color on the block and printed that. And when you'll read the book, you'll find out more about the rainbow roll process. Now, the one on the upper right is summer, and that one I did quite a bit of collaging on. So I printed my block on different papers with different inks, and then I cut out little parts of the different ones and collaged them together. And the one on the lower right, the fall one, is done on spray painted paper, which is actually a piece of paper that my friend Carol Gunther Moore made and gave to me. So I save all my scraps and my papers and my unsuccessful prints, and I use them in all kinds of different ways. It's really great. You put some time into cutting a block, and then you have it forever and you can just play with it. So one thing we did was to make a list of all the prints in the back of the book so that you can find out what size the prints are and, you know, the techniques that I used for them. So as far as that goes, I'm going to let you all discover the rest of the inside of the book. And now we're going to show you the video that we made in my studio. If we'd been able to do this in person, I would have brought some of my materials in and actually done a demonstration for you all. But Sarah had this great idea to come to my studio and go through the entire process of making a block print. So while we're showing this, think of any questions that you have for me afterwards, and feel free to call the Toadstool and order some books or email. So I'll see you after the video.
I was just gonna say, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I was just gonna say, it's 17 minutes, so don't give up on us. Follow it through to the end. And give me a sec to get it going here. You have to go into that and do share screen. Share, okay. And I'm going to, hang on, view full screen.
Hi, welcome to my studio. And I'm going to do a small block print today. I'm going to cut it and print it. I'm using a rubbery material that is really easy to cut. They use this in schools a lot. And I've made a small little pencil drawing of a leaf on tracing paper. I'm now transferring it to the block. These blocks are very sensitive and they pick up all of this pencil really nicely. I'm just rubbing it with a bone folder. Here we go. Didn't quite get this, but I'll just pencil this in. I'm going to do a sort of a positive negative cut to show you the two ways of making lines. So to make a white line and have this part print darker, you actually cut away the line. You can see I'm using this little simple speedball chisel. These handles have different size little chisels that you can put in them. I have several different handles. And I'm just making all these little ribs of the leaf now. Right. Now the other side, I'm going to have be black lines on a light background. And to do that, you have to cut away everything but where you want the dark lines to print. So I'm going to just go on the outside of the line here a little bit. And now, cutting out the part that isn't the ribs of the leaf. And while I'm doing this, I'm being careful to keep my hand out of the trajectory of the chisel if it happens to slip. The thing about doing a block print is that you really can't do much about fixing it if you make a mistake. So you have to be fairly sure that you like your image, and you have to be pretty careful about cutting it. I mean, there always can be little mistakes, and then you have to change your image a little bit to accommodate that. If you do woodcuts, you can actually fix them more easily. You can use like a wood putty to fix them. Okay, almost done this part. Now I'm going to take a wider chisel and I'm just going to cut away the background, but I'm going to leave some of these nice chisel marks. This is a really nice thing about block prints, is that you can get a very special effect that you really can't get with anything else of the actual, you know, you get an image of the process. Here we go. Ta-da! So, now we're ready to print it. I have several different papers here that I'm going to print this little block on. Some handmade papers that I've bought, and this is a little piece of an unsuccessful print that I've kept. I keep all of my scraps and have a wonderful time using them for collaging and printing on. And it's one thing I love about block prints is that you can take that one block and print it so many different ways with different colored inks and the papers that you printed on, and it completely changes the look of it. Now I'm ready to print this block, and this is a really fun part of this process. So I usually use water-based block print inks. They're so easy to clean up and they're very non-toxic. And I only use oil-based ink if I'm going to be using watercolors to color the prints in, so that the watercolors don't blur the ink. And what I'm going to do is make 2 different colored rainbow rolls of color. Just putting these out on this piece of what is this stuff?
Rain fade.
Okay, so this is fun. You're gonna use a brayer to roll these inks out, and you get a kind of a wonderful melding of these 2 colors. So I'm using these, and then I'm going to use these. I love to do multiple colors on a block. All right. So here we go. I'm going to roll this onto our little block print. I never start right out using my good paper because you usually don't get a very good print the first time. This is called charging the block, where you just get it inked up and get it to receive the ink. So I'm just using a piece of scrap paper, which I've just laid down. And I don't have a printing press to do this. I just do it with this little spoon. It's a very low-tech process. This is the very old-timey traditional way of doing a block print. And let's see what we've got here. All right. So as you can see, when it's printed, the image reverses, which is something that you have to really be aware of if you're doing lettering or if you're doing a scene that is very recognizable. So you have to actually cut the image backwards to have it print in the right direction. So let's use one of our nice pieces of paper now and see what we get.
Sound.
Just gonna ink it up again. I thought this paper was appropriate for a print of a leaf since it has leaves in it. Just give it a good rub with my little spoon. And ta-da! Here. What I'm going to do now is print it on this white paper, which I've decided I'm going to print this in 2 different colorways in 2 different directions on this paper. So I'm going to just drop this on here and rub away. This is very good exercise if you're doing a large print. All right, so So there's that. I'll just put these aside. I have some ink on my fingers that I've gotten on the paper. Now I'm going to just blot this color as much as I possibly can. As I print, I usually clean the block fairly often by blotting it with some scrap paper, because especially on a print that has thinner lines and more detail, they do fill up with ink after you've done it a few times. Okay, now let's try this. Let's see what happens when we use this color. If I was really being super careful, I would actually wash this block off with water and let it dry. But we'll just see what we get here. So we've got quite a different look now. And let's just try printing it on this interesting piece of paper. So I want to get it in the right place. So I'm going to hold up the block and place it down. And I'm going to flip it over. So here's this very intense image on this side of a print that I did. And I really like the back side of it a lot. And let's see. Not a great print, but kind of an interesting effect. Alrighty. Now, don't think I had quite enough ink on the block last time, and you can see how it didn't make a nice dark print. Now I'm going to try this one again. I think this will be interesting. So I'm placing it where I want it to be. Now I'm going to flip it over again. And this is going to be an interesting look. Okay, let's see what we've got. Ta-da! So the possibilities are really endless for getting different effects with one simple little print. I really enjoy how you can do these positive, negative things and going in different directions and playing with the colors. Okay, let's just try it. Let's try it on this. This is marbleized paper, which is really gorgeous. Let's just see what that looks like. Start to, after you've done this for a long time, you start to get a feel for how much ink you should be putting on here. It's a very low-tech kind of printmaking. I majored in etching in college, and then after college, I was living in Boston and I didn't have access to a printing press. So I started doing block prints because I hardly needed any equipment and I could do it in a really small space. And it's very portable. And I found out that I just totally loved the process and just stuck with it. So this is quite lovely on this marbleized paper. You can sort of see this great pattern through the ink. And in a very short time, we have a lot of different looking images. So thanks very much for watching. I've really enjoyed sharing this process with everyone. This is something that many people did once in school and decided it was really a pain and never wanted to do it again. But it's great to show my enthusiasm for doing this and just demystify the process a little bit.
And Kim is back.
I'm back. I hope you all enjoyed that.
That was gorgeous. What a beautiful look into the process. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel so lucky to have such a wonderful place to work. It's such a joy.
You do have a really, really beautiful studio too.
Yeah.
Folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature to ask.
Where is the chat feature?
Or you could ask your question just out loud.
Kim, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I noticed putty knives all around where your ink tubes were in that video.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
use the putty knives in that process, or is that just for another project?
I actually use them mostly to just clean up the ink. You know, I try to get as much ink off the piece of plexiglass as I can before I wash it. But I also use it to spread out the ink if I'm doing a more complicated color roll.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I had one more question. Is the material that you were using called FlexiCut?
Well, there are actually quite a lot of different iterations of this. It's almost like a carving an eraser, only on a larger scale. And I get mine from a company called Dick Blick.
Mm-hmm.
But there are, you know, there's many kinds: safety cut, easy cut, all very similar. You can
Okay.
get it at art stores.
Carol asks, do you ever work with wood anymore?
Well, I actually don't. I've developed this really cool technique that's kind of like the lazy woman's woodcut. I cut my block in the linoleum or rubber, and then I ink up the block, and I actually can press the inked up block onto a piece of wood, and it picks up the wood grain pattern and it looks like a wood block. So let me just show you an example of that. You know, like this print here, you can see this pattern in the sky and the water. And it's really neat because you can actually put the wood grain where you want it. Like, you know, here's this one where I really got kind of a neat effect in the trees in the background. And I've actually even used things like paper towels to do it. Let me show you. If you guys can see this image of the mountain, I actually pressed a paper towel on that inked up block and got this neat pattern. And then I did the wood grain in the water. So that seems to be working really well for me at this point. Oh, here's another question. Do you sharpen your cutters as they dull or just replace them? If you sharpen, is there a special tool to use? I actually don't sharpen them because it's really, really easy and inexpensive to get just these little interchangeable tips for the chisels. You know, if you're doing something like a wood engraving like Beth Chromis does, you have some really nice chisels and she's very good at sharpening them. But I've never really learned how to do that, I have to admit. I mean, you use sharpening stones and oil. And actually my little tips last for a really long time because this is a very soft, forgiving material that I'm using. Okay, here's another question. Will there be more calendars someday or done with it? Well, I think that maybe Sarah and I will have to have a little discussion about this at some point. We've been very focused on doing this book project, and I have to say that it's been quite wonderful to feel like this is something that is not going to be just for a year. It's gonna be ongoing to, you know, have this book. It doesn't feel as time sensitive. So that was really nice. Here's another question. Do you ever use traditional lino or always soft cut? Yes, I do use traditional linoleum too, which is again a material that you can buy from an art supply store. Some of these ones I'll show you. Some of the Wild Things ones really have, these are actually not very large prints and they have a lot of detail in them, and you really can get better detail with linoleum. So I've definitely used that a bunch. Some of these other, you know, bigger prints that I've done have also been on linoleum. Let me just show you. Like, this is quite a large print in real life and quite detailed. And so I used a large piece of linoleum for this. And something you can do to make linoleum easier to cut is to warm it up. You can, you know, put it near a stove, or you can put a washcloth over it and iron it. And it actually does get harder as it gets older. So it's better to use some newer linoleum for that. Let's see. I think I don't see any more questions right now.
I was just going to jump in and say, if people want to have Kim sign a book or dedicate it to somebody, then let the Toadstool know that when you're putting your order in, and Kim will sign. We've got a bunch here that she's going to sign. So just let them know, and we'll be in constant communication with Willard or the other bookstores so that you can get your books signed.
I'm just gonna plug, definitely reach out to the Peterborough Toadstool. Their phone number is 603-924-3543. And Willard will handle all the signed books. It's going to be great. Whatever you need, please just ask and we'll make sure that we do our best to get that for you. There
Oh.
are a couple more questions.
Yes, I do. I
Carol
see a
asks,
couple.
do any of the flexible cutting materials you use have a back with an aggressive? She asks if you can attach it to a cylinder and print that way.
Well, that's a really interesting question that I've never even asked myself. I would think it would work really well, probably. I haven't really explored this material with printing presses very much. I think you would have to be extremely careful with the pressure of the press because it does, it tends to move, and I think it would, tend to kind of flatten out a little bit if you put a lot of pressure on it. And the fact that it's so flexible is what has made it possible for me to print it in the ceramics, to kind of meld into the clay and move. But yeah, I haven't really used a press very much since I was doing etchings, and I also did a lot of monoprints at one point and used an etching press for that. Let's see, here's another question from Janine. Have you ever used acrylic paint instead of block ink? No, I never have done that. There's just something really perfect about the consistency of the block print ink. And I don't really know what the difference is between the ink and the paint, but it just rolls out really nicely and adheres. And I think it probably doesn't dry out as quickly as acrylic paint. It has some kind of, binder in it. So you can get so many colors of ink. It's just phenomenal. So let's see. I think that's it. So thank you guys all so much for joining me. I've really, really enjoyed this more than I expected to, actually. And I've had a lot of help from a lot of people, and especially from Scott, my husband Scott, who's been an incredible support during this whole process. Truly, I felt very, very lucky to be able to do this, and especially during this bizarre year we've been having. It's been great to have this big project, and I'm truly thrilled with how the book came out. So thank you, everyone.
Kim, thank you so much for doing this with us. Sarah, thank you for orchestrating this. We are so thrilled to have hosted you. You really, truly bring beauty of the natural world into our homes, especially in such a strange, bizarre time in our lives collectively. Thank you for reminding us that the world is going to keep turning and that there's always something beautiful out there to be seen. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Great to see all my friends.
Thank you.
Shoot us an email, go online to toadbooks.com or give us